through some of these apps, they can get on there and see, okay, where are people seeing these migratory birds? Where are they seeing these really cool wildlife or plants that are maybe blooming? All of that's pretty much right at your fingertips now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to VetFolio Voice. This episode features Dr. Cheryl Rosenfeld. And after talking to her, I'm really wondering if the only limits to what we can do in our careers in veterinary medicine are the limits of our own creativity. Now, for the record, I know that's an overly broad generalization. There are many factors that affect our career paths, our career choices, but if you can't tell, Dr. Rosenfeld left me feeling really inspired. She reached out after listening to the podcast, which made me oh so happy in and of itself, and she shared an article she'd authored on her insights on different apps for identifying and sharing wildlife sightings. After reading her article, we were able to connect, and that led to a fascinating conversation about veterinary medicine, wildlife conservation, technology, academia, and more. Clearly, we talked about not limiting ourselves to one path in life and in our work, and how even small actions like documenting wildlife with an app can have larger ripple effects on conservation efforts. If you're looking for your daily dose of inspiration, stick around. This one's for you. And if you're interested in some of the resources we cover in this talk, they'll all be listed in the show notes. I have personally downloaded all of these apps and had just an amazing time sitting on my porch and noting all the different birds I can hear just sitting in my backyard. It's been amazing. So let me tell you about Dr. Rosenfeld and we'll get into our talk. Dr. Cheryl Rosenfeld earned her undergraduate and veterinary degrees from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in 1993 and 1995, respectively. She earned a PhD in animal science with an emphasis on reproductive biology and endocrinology from the University of Missouri in 2000, later taking a faculty position at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Missouri. She's risen through the ranks and became a full professor in 2017. In 2021, she was inducted as a fellow in the American Association for the Advancement of Science in the field of medical science, recognized for her research on reproductive biology and endocrine disruption, investigating the way developmental exposure to environmental chemicals affects humans and animals. On select weekends and holidays, Dr. Rosenfeld also serves as a relief veterinarian at animal emergency clinics in Central Illinois.
In the age of Dr. Google and conflicting influencer advice, it's important to follow the evidence. That's why the NAVC publishes free veterinary journals for every member of the veterinary healthcare team. Subscribe to Today's Veterinary Practice and Today's Veterinary Nurse for evidence-based clinical insights. Or check out Today's Veterinary Business for practice management guidance and deep dives on the latest industry trends. Visit navc.com and hit the Publications tab to learn more and subscribe today.
Well, I'm really excited for this episode. I'm joined by Dr. Cheryl Rosenfeld, and this episode sort of stemmed out of you sending me an article you had written talking about resources for kind of connecting with the world around us and the nature around us, and then come to find out you've got this amazing career where you do all these different things and just speak to so many areas of vet med. So Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's an honor. I listen to your podcast every week. I'm a dedicated listener, I should say.
I can't tell you how much that means to me. Like, that made me so happy. And I feel like I just want to give like a tiny little shout out here to, you sent me an email through that dvm@vetfolio.com email at the end of the podcast. And I'm so thrilled that you did that, because I feel like it's given us this great opportunity to have this talk. But enough about that. Really would love for you to tell a little bit of your story, because this was just so impressive to me when we initially connected and you told me about your journey through vet med. I mean, you do all sorts of different things.
I think all of us do different things at different points too. So when I was in vet school, I went to the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign College of Veterinary Medicine, and I kind of had two things I primarily did besides going to vet school. So my veterinary training was paid for by the state of Illinois, because what I had was a graduate research assistantship, and I had to work 10 hours in a lab And basically my tuition was paid and I got $200 stipend a month, which was really good. Then my friend got me into this, what we call night intern program. And what that entailed was that I lived above the clinic. And at that time, there weren't as many emergencies. So what happened was I'd go to a pager, and then I would call the people back. And so I lived above the clinic and I would take the emergencies initially and then bring the intern or the residents in. So I kind of got this, dangled a bit in that emergency medicine aspect. So those two things really greatly influenced my career. So after graduating from vet school, I'd been in practice and I went on to do a residency in anatomical pathology. But I learned quickly that dead things were, while interest in certainly the disease processes, were, intriguing to me. I just got a little tired of dealing with just dead animals. And I started then doing a PhD in reproductive biology. That was paid for by a USDA fellowship. So at that time, the USDA was trying to attract veterinarians into getting a PhD and going into research. And, I was very interested. So I applied for it and I was successful to get that USDA fellowship, which I was incredibly grateful for. So through that, I get the PhD degree, and that was at the University of Missouri. And I've just risen the ranks here at the University of Missouri. And I'm now a full professor at the College of Veterinary Medicine, where I teach first and second year veterinary students. But, I think to me as a professor, when teaching, current veterinary students, it's important to keep my hand into what, current knowledge, current drugs, current approaches. And so on weekends and on holidays, I do relief emergency veterinary work. So that kind of taps back to that time when I was a veterinary student taking those night calls. And I find that very exciting. So, it's kind of wearing different hats at some point, but it also, to me, it has, I think it also interplays a lot with each other.
Listening to you talk about this, I'm so glad that we are talking about it, because this kind of threw me when I first got your email. You sent me this article you had written. It had to do with wildlife identification, but your signature said, professor at University of Missouri. But then you said you were listening to the podcast as you were driving to do relief jobs. And so I think it's so cool that I agree with you. Many of us do different things throughout our veterinary careers. And it's amazing that this career field offers such diverse opportunities. I just think it's so cool that you're doing so many of them at the same time.
Well, it's a lot, but, to me, I find it exhilarating just because you never get bored. It's always challenging. I just love the opportunity to be able to do different hats at different periods. And also through the University of Missouri, I've been able to have a research program that's been funded through National Institute of Health, which I'm very honored to have their support as well. So we know my research involves looking at how environmental chemicals can affect reproductive biology, both in humans and in animal models. So it's a lot of hats, but I do think it's, for me, it's really exciting to be able to given the opportunity. And I feel very blessed to have all those opportunities.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a really interesting and important topic of research with chemicals and affecting reproductive biology. I want to dive into that in a little bit here, because that's really interesting. I'd love to know a little bit more about your research. How do you balance all of it? Like you said, you're wearing all of these different hats and all of them demand something unique from you. Not only, your schedule and who you're interacting with, but really like different types of knowledge. So how do you kind of go through maybe like a typical week, a typical month, and switch in between all of these roles and still fulfill everything that each role is asking of you?
Well, sometimes I don't feel I do always do that. I think any of us would probably say that too, but we do our best. During the week, starting next week, actually, I'll be teaching the first year veterinary students. And so I'll be teaching gross anatomy, which I'm excited about. But I also work on manuscripts and then grant proposals. And then comes the weekend, I'll be focusing, on, vet medicine through the clinic aspect. So, and some of it that guides me in my teaching and my research, kind of what the important problems are that I need to convey to the students, and also what things I should be looking at as a researcher too. So, I think scheduling is really important. But I also think at the same time, so one of the things I just got back from vacation, I think that to me is one thing. Doing all these things, it's really important to have like downtime. To have the ability to say, I'm sorry, but I need to take time for myself and put things aside. Okay. And say, look, I do need to have that downtime. That's got to be blocked off. And that's helped me to kind of put things in perspective And it kind of just helps me to balance like all these different tasks that I'm, take on.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think it's so easy to really get absorbed in this field. And so I think that's a really good reminder to say you can do it all, but you also have to remember to take time for yourself.
Absolutely. And your family too. I mean, so I think that's got to be time set aside. And I'm a scheduler. I like schedules. And like, for instance, I'm already planning December, January, just because that's how I operate. To me, I'm always kind of thinking a few months ahead as to what is going to be needed? What are my deadlines? What is also the things I want to do for my own self and my own, personal growth as well too. So, I think that's just how I've kind of operated throughout my career. And I feel like that to me, it's helped me to maintain my well-being, both physical and mental. I think that's something as veterinarians, we really need to be talking more about. Really, upsets me when I hear so many of the people in our field either leaving the profession or, ultimately committing suicide or, they have poor health. I think we need to consider more, how do we think of the person as a whole? Because, if you don't think about your health, you can't be a good veterinarian, regardless of what you do.
I couldn't agree more that, yeah, we're all whole people and, we exist in so many different realms in our lives and we occupy so many different roles. And we really need to make sure that we're looking out for ourselves, taking care of ourselves, but also, to your point, taking care of each other. It's sort of painting a picture for me when going back to your research here for a minute, when you're saying you're studying these chemicals and how they affect reproductive biology in animals and people. I feel like I'm getting this picture that you're really interested in holistic health of people as individuals, of taking care of our fellow people, making sure the things we're doing are safe and healthy for ourselves and then also, of course, taking care of nature and the animals around us. It sounds like you've just got a big interest in just overall well-being.
That's correct. I think to me, like, because the environment certainly does play a huge role. Some of the things are beyond our choice. We can't control what chemicals we might be exposed to. So my lab looks at bisphenol A, bisphenol S, and some other endocrine disruptors that have been in the news lately. But also, we can control some of like our ability to get to green spaces and the areas that might make us have increased well-being. That's what, to me, as city planners, I think that we need to be thinking more about. Do they have that opportunity to get to like an area where they can feel whole and just basically, be one with nature? I mean, I know that sounds kind of corny, but I think that's really important as, it's our population explodes. We've got to be thinking about conserving some green space for that, just for that ourselves as well.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, on so many levels, we need to be thinking about that. Like you brought up city planners. I live pretty far out, and so it's a drive to get anywhere. And sometimes that's really inconvenient and drives me crazy because I'm like, oh, I just want to go do this thing, but I have to drive an hour to do it. Yet, at the same time, I really do appreciate that it's very easy to get out into nature, and doing those types of things are very close by and very convenient. And that is a little bit easy to take for granted and say, oh, well, gosh, it's so inconvenient that I have to drive here to go to the store or something like that. But then taking for granted that, yes, but it is so easy to get out and get into nature and feel whole, as you say, which I think you capture it perfectly when you say that.
We up here where I live in Columbia, Missouri, we're very fortunate to have a lot of trails and nature, a lot of parks around us. From my house, I can get to 10 minutes easily, different trails. But actually, I hadn't considered some of that until some of these apps that we're going to be talking about came into play. And also, at first I thought, oh, you have to get away. You have to go abroad. You have to be able to really, go out and see birds and wildlife, whether that be going to on a safari in Africa. But it really isn't. There's a lot of things that are close by that we can enjoy, whether you live, in different portions of the country. Right now, fall migration is going to be happening, and the birds, they're on the move. I mean, they're starting in Canada. They're going to come all the way down to where you live and then go across to Central and South America. So in the process, they're here. They're coming right to our back doors. All we need to do is just take that time and go in, in those areas. And what's also really neat is that there's now ways that people can go online and find out, where can I go and see birds? Where can I see this wildlife you talk about. So like through some of these apps, they can get on there and see, okay, where are people seeing these migratory birds? Where are they seeing these really cool wildlife or plants that are maybe blooming? All of that's pretty much right at your fingertips now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more because when you emailed me, your timing could not have been better because I had just had an encounter in my backyard with this bird and it was really high up and I thought I knew what it was. And then as I saw it again the next morning, I went, no, I think I'm completely wrong. And actually, I'm terrible at identifying birds. And so you sent me this article that talks about all these different apps and how we can use them for exactly what you just described. Can you tell us more about the apps, specifically how you use them and how you find them beneficial for us, but maybe just for nature and that information on the whole?
One of the things, I don't know if you're as a child played the match game, we have to, match up things and like that matches to that. And your point about the hawk and trying to identify it. That's actually where I was, several years ago, because what I would do is I would go on like these trips and I would have like pictures of birds. I'd look at the guidebooks and I couldn't identify them. I'd be like, what is that bird? And the other thing would be like, where you may be out your back door, you go maybe to a different state, different country. There's birds all around us and they're all calling. And sometimes you can identify, okay, that's that northern cardinals one. But, for me, there was some that I couldn't even identify just based on the vocalizations. And then, I found out, several years ago about these free apps. And these free apps, they seem to get better and better each year. For instance, there's now, like we call it, Merlin app. And this Merlin app is great because, and it's available for iPhone or Android. You just have to go onto the app store and just download it. And it can identify birds basically through the pictures. So I was able to take those pictures I'd taken while, on vacation or so and able to put it through there. And I was able to identify, oh, that's that particular bird. And that actually connected me with then once I knew the name, it's like you now know a friend and you go and look more about your friend. So then you can read up, okay, that's this particular bird and these are it's like where it might be found and this is what it eats and all of that. And so it really connected me. At that time, initially, Merlin, though, did not do vocalizations. What's great now is you can actually literally just push a button and within minutes, you'll see what we call a spectrogram. That's how the calls come out. And you can see the vocalizations. And now Merlin can use AI technology and identify which bird is calling at any one time. So if let's say you're hearing a bird out your window and singing, just turn on that Merlin app and it can identify that's that particular bird singing, and I'll show you a picture. You can then link and I'll show you more information on that particular bird. They've got it working in the US, portions of Hawaii, as I found out for some, and they're starting to get all the birds of Europe as well, too. So they're basically kind of broadening the database as people enter more and more. So it's great because as more people use the app, it also benefits others because it's now learning what these birds are across the world. And that's ultimately, I think at some point it will be able to have that feature. Definitely right now in the continental US, you can use it for any bird and it'll identify based on either a picture or vocalization. But then I also came to find out about another app called eBird, and both Merlin and eBird are through the Cornell Ornithology Lab. And what eBird does, it's great because you can share your findings. I'm a list person, so I list what birds I see. I can add my pictures to that. I can add the vocalizations. And some of this can be really important, especially if you're reporting unusual bird for your area. It just provides proof, yep, she did see that bird. You can identify based on the call or based on the picture itself. So that's one feature of eBird. But eBird has even a better feature that I really found most helpful. And that's this ability to go and you can search like your county where you live. For instance, I live in Boone County and I can go on eBird, search Boone County, and I can find where the best places are to see the birds. So like they have what we call hotspots, and you can then go and look, see, okay, if maybe I'm just have a few days in a certain area and I want to maximize my time. So if I go to this spot and this spot, I know I'm going to see likely these kind of birds. And you can also look at somebody else's checklist to see what did they see, like, the last 24 hours, last 48 hours. So all of that data is within eBird. But this is even to me something really more important. If you think about it from the holistic standpoint, what it's ultimately doing is also allowing the Cornell Ornithology Lab to basically treat us as citizen scientists. where our data is really important. It becomes important in terms of saying, hey, wait a minute, this area might be a great place for birds and, and other wildlife, because you can enter that now through eBird too. And if that's the case, what it can do is it can place pressure on policymakers and maybe make that a preserved area. So maybe it will preserve it from development. So we keep that as green spaces. Or maybe, it says we really need a green space right here because this is where the migratory birds are coming through. And it really would help to have some wetlands in there that they can rest on their journey back and forth across the Central America to Northern America. So I think to me, that eBird has a lot of features that really help people that want to get into the field. The other thing about, though, it doesn't do is identifying plants and wildlife. So that's where the third app comes into play. And that's what's called iNaturalist. Surprisingly, it was developed by a master's student as part of their initial project. It's become really, much more. It's become a global entity in the sense you can identify almost any plant, animal, whether it be a mammal, a fish, a bird, through it. And if the app doesn't know what it is, what you can do is share the picture. And now we have a whole community of naturalists. They'll step in and try to identify it for you. And so again, we're keeping track of all this biological, information that I think is going to be so crucial. And, there are, cases where they thought the species was extinct. And, using these apps, they've actually found that species is just a little bit where they thought it would be. So it's kind of interesting of how that's been also used to show that there are these species that are still alive that were once thought to be gone extinct. So, I think to me, this is a great ways for veterinarians, those, that love animals, to get really connected to learning more about nature and all that lives in that environment.
Wow. My wheels are just turning on all of the ways that these apps can be beneficial. I mean, there's only so much funding for people who can spend their careers going out and doing this type of identification and doing this research. So, I mean, this is sort of crowdsourcing some of this data to say, like you said, making us citizen scientists to say, hey, we're seeing these animals and here's these scientifically documented ways to confirm, yes, these are where these birds are. This is where these plants are, this wildlife, whatever it may be. I mean, gosh, can you imagine how much more information? I'm sure you can imagine. That's probably why you wrote the article. How much more information is able to be gathered by all of us going and recording what we're seeing in the areas. I mean, I think that's a really powerful example you gave of species thought to be extinct. And then it turns out, they were there. And that's, I mean, gosh, that's critical information to have for so many reasons.
Absolutely. It feels like I'm always learning something new. I went to Hawaii to see some of their endemic birds, which I was grateful to see. But one day I wasn't seeing any endemic birds. I was getting very, frustrated as anyone might, so I'd gone to the place where they're supposed to be. My friend had taken me on this crazy hike that was overgrown. I was getting stabbed with blackberry vines and stuff.
Oh, the worst.
Yes. And then all of a sudden this butterfly just flew right past me and landed on a tree. And I didn't know what it was, but I obviously took a picture of it. So I'm like, okay, put it through iNaturalist. This was just last week. And it turns out that it's the state insect of Hawaii. It's one of two endemics. And it's already considered vulnerable. So it's extinct on some of the Hawaiian islands. Where I was, they are seeing it, but again, the reports are certainly less. So by adding that data to it, I can then say, hey, I saw this on this day at this time and in this right area. So, but I just thought that was so cool that, I'm like, because I was getting so depressed, I wasn't seeing anything. This beautiful butterfly just passed me, has a very long name. So I don't want to butcher that name, but yeah, it's it is a state insect of Hawaii. And I thought that was really cool.
Okay, that hits home because it made me think of something that just kind of makes me laugh. So I'm originally from the Midwest. Let's see if this lands the way it did in my head. I'm originally from Illinois, and so cardinal is our state bird in Illinois. And I remember my husband saying, gosh, you Chicago people get so excited when you see cardinals. And we really do. And I thought everybody got excited when they saw cardinals. And so, it seems sort of like, every state has their own bird, their own insect, their own flower, this and the other thing. To me, like thinking about how excited I get to see a cardinal, which is not a vulnerable species and, something that we see pretty regularly. I mean, I can imagine what that must have felt like for you to see like this beautiful butterfly and find out it's the state insect of Hawaii. It's vulnerable, and here you are, face to face with it, and just how cool that must have been.
It was, and I said that at least frightened that very depressing walk, and we didn't really know how long it was going to take us to get back to some area where we could actually, get back to the car. So it certainly brightened my step. It put a smile on my face, and certainly it carried me through that rest of the way when I was feeling pretty depressed at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you said it was one of two endemic insects, and then that you weren't seeing endemic birds while you were there. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Well, so it's one of the endemic butterflies to Hawaii.
Butterflies. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's happened to Hawaii? There, it's a beautiful island, and I obviously people love to go there. And I had a great guide when we were there, and her name was Mandy, and she explained, kind of what's happened. The history of it is basically when people would move to the island, they were somewhat depressed. And as you can, like you talked about the cardinal. So there was actually people that brought the northern cardinal to Hawaii. So you will see that if you go to Hawaii, it is not native to Hawaii, but people would be like, so they would go to visit Hawaii or they go move there. And they're like, well, we're going to take our birds. And this happened, for essentially once for the US, South America, and Asia. So basically what you now have is this whole conglomeration of non-native birds that are present in Hawaii. And we saw a lot of that, when I was there. Like we had saffron finches, that should be more like in Central and South America. They've got this coqui, which is only supposed to be in Puerto Rico, but it's taken over the island. So essentially you have non-native species, plants, birds, frogs, butterflies even, and they're out competing the native ones. So that's what's the problem. And some of the native ones, specifically the honey creepers, they're facing a huge problem right now in the sense that Hawaii did not initially have mosquitoes, but that also got introduced as more people moved to the island. And mosquitoes can carry avian malaria, which is highly deadly to these honey creepers that had never been exposed to it. So they had no immunity whatsoever. There is one of them that's somewhat gaining some immunity, but unfortunately, it's destroying many of the honey creeper populations. So, you can only go certain areas to see these honey creepers. And we had gone to Kauai where we should have seen them, but I did not see any. Kona we did, which was good. The only reason we were seeing them in Kona was because it's a higher elevation. So the mosquitoes can't survive at that higher elevation. But Kauai doesn't have the high elevations as Kona does. Now, there are people that are trying to save them. What they're doing basically is releasing via drones and helicopters these mosquitoes that carry a different type of Wolbachia. And what happens with these guys, essentially for mosquitoes to reproduce, they have to have the same Wolbachia, both the male and the female. So essentially they're releasing males with a different type of Wolbachia, but they don't carry avian malaria, only the female does. So essentially if they breed to that female, nothing happens. They're sterile essentially.
Wow. And I just Googled the honey creeper. Gosh, these are beautiful birds.
They are.
And I could see being really disappointed in not seeing these native birds. I mean, that's a sad story. Whenever you hear about non-native species outcompeting native species and making it hard for them to survive. And certainly I think in helping to provide this information with people using these apps and things like that, hopefully can also aid some of these conservation efforts and keeping track to say, are these efforts working of releasing these mosquitoes and preserving these populations?
Absolutely. And they're also trying to plant the trees that these honey creepers like at higher elevations. So they're trying to do that, several approaches to trying to save them. But unfortunately, like I said, some of them have already gone extinct on several of the islands. So pretty much the main strongholds are in Kona, Kauai, and there's one in Maui that you can still see, but it's very difficult. Even on Kona, we had to hike a lot to get to see some of these honey creepers.
Wow. I'm glad that you got to see them because, these are absolutely beautiful. And I think probably maybe in diving into the type of endemic birds that are supposed to be there and going on this trek to make sure you see them. I mean, it also opens the door to the type of research that you're talking about and learning about, well, now they're releasing these different types of mosquitoes. And I mean, it's like with anything, right? Knowledge is power. And so the more we learn about the species that are supposed to be there and how they operate, how they survive, the more we can help support those native species and aid in conservation efforts, whether it's big sweeping projects like releasing these other mosquitoes, or even just to say, hey, this type of animal will outcompete this other type of animal. And so just being sensitive to the impact we might be having on the environment around us.
Absolutely. So I think that's one of the things, we might like to have it. And I love northern cardinals, and I don't think they're really the big problems. Really, it's more so, loss of habitat, infectious diseases like avian malaria. They're certainly contributing to some of the demise of these populations as well.
I wonder, are cardinals supposed to be here in Florida?
I think you can have cardinals there in Florida.
Okay, so I can still be excited about the cardinals here.
You absolutely can. But I think that would be a stretch for a northern cardinal to cross the Pacific to make it to Hawaii.
That makes sense.
Yeah, not on its own volition. I don't think it has enough strong wings, and they generally don't migrate too. So, but yeah, I think in Florida and definitely in Texas, I know I saw a lot of cardinals there.
Sure. And I just realized you're in Missouri, but you're right on that Missouri-Illinois lines. Do you also get excited for cardinals, or do they make your eye twitch now over?
Oh, gosh, no, I have lots. And I was really fortunate to have actually a really unusual cardinal. And that was one, I shared it with several of my fellow birders. And it was like what we call partially leucistic cardinal. So it's partly white, and it was really cool. But I was just really excited to see that one, because that's about 130,000 chance of getting a partially leucistic bird.
Wow. And I think, gosh, you're making such a good case for all of these apps and being able to identify what we're seeing, because you might just otherwise see this bird and go, oh, that's a cool looking bird, and then not think again about it. But if you identify it and say, wow, it was what'd you say, 1 in 30,000 chance of seeing that, and here it was.
Yeah, so I said I definitely reported on eBird, so they can also kind of hopefully that somebody can use that data to kind of see if are we seeing unusual mutations that, I kind of keep track of that as well. So I feel I'm contributing to something that can be used for such great purposes like you mentioned.
And so I want to connect that back to your research real quick and just know your thoughts about it. Because like you said, if we were to start seeing more mutations and animals are starting to appear differently than what we're used to, of course, that would speak to, okay, now what is driving these mutations, and is it man-made? I mean, let's be honest, probably. And having that information might allow us to intervene earlier, hopefully. So just tying that back to, like you said, bisphenol A and things like that, some of these chemicals that we didn't know initially were harmful. Do you see that kind of coming full circle back into your research?
Absolutely. So I believe you were at University of Florida at one point.
Yes.
And you may have come across a professor named Dr. Lou Gillette. I don't know if...
Sure, yeah.
Well, he passed away, but he actually had one of the most famous studies on this, linked essentially how the environment can affect our own reproductive health. Basically, he was tracking the alligators in Lake Apopka, which can be contaminated with these environmental chemicals. And he had done a lot of measurements on those environmental chemicals compared to a relatively same size one where you didn't have such exposure. And what you basically was finding in these alligators, that he was basically getting ones that had both sexes, it was both male and female. So a lot of these chemicals can have estrogenic effects. So essentially you could get these where they both have what we call, hermaphrodite, it's both male and female. And that, was not just by chance. I mean, because again, he controlled for it by looking at, a lake of the same size. To me, that speaks highly that, there clearly are things happening in the environment. I mean, I think, we'd like to talk about the canary in the coal mine, but I honestly think in this case, it might be the alligator in the lake that could be then driving what we should be concerned about. Because if it's happening to them, it's working up the food chain. And how does that affect humans as well? So, to me, I think if we're seeing in animals who have similar reproductive capacities and lifestyles, I think we need to be worried about how that's going to be affecting, everyone, including ourselves.
Yes, I do remember that research and a lot of that coming out of the University of Florida, the alligator in the lake. Absolutely. That is appropriate. So let me bring it full circle again here, which I feel like you keep giving me these great opportunities to bring this full circle. I understand that you have a property in Missouri that you've sort of kept as a green space in this wildlife conservation type of space. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I bought my house in 2001, and I was really influenced actually by the woman I just visited in Hawaii because she had this great property. And when a house for sale came up in that area, she, sent me an email and a picture and she said, "This is your house." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll have to see about that." And so I bought, in that point, it was 2.7 acres, and it was very wooded acreage, and then it backed up to additional wooded acreage and essentially the rest of Reamer Lake. And, everything was fine because the Bremer family owned it. So I had no concerns. I knew that they were good stewards of the land and they weren't going to, sell it for development. But to my surprise, in 2022, I woke up one day and I found auction signs all over that land. And it was like a knife to my heart because that lake was something every day I would come home and, no matter how bad my day was, I would see that beautiful lake, and I'd see it transition through the different seasons, which we have here in Missouri, whether it be like winterland, a winter wonderland, it be, that beautiful spring flowers blooming. But it was always such a, amazing picture to me to come home and see and think about how lucky I was to have such a beautiful property surrounding me. And so when I saw it was up for auction, I knew I had to do everything in my power to try to win that auction. So I contacted a banker and I was very pleased that they worked with me. So I had, secured a loan should I win the auction. And so the auction day came. They had six tracts of land, and whoever bid the highest can pick whatever tracts of land. It was tract 5 that I wanted. And so essentially they started opening the bidding and it went up pretty high fast, a little bit higher than I wanted. And I eventually did win. So I was really happy. So that brought my total acreage now to about 30 acres. And I own part of the Bremer Lake, which I'm really pleased at. And that lake is even, something for me really important during the winter time. Not only do I get to see this beautiful winter wonderland, it also serves as important habitat for the trumpeter swans that use it as they're kind of coming through Missouri. So if people are saying, "Oh, I haven't seen any trumpeter swans," I'll be like, I've got them right out my back door. I can just walk out through my woods and I can go to the lake and I can see them. And I get to just basically take my lunch, watch them. And it's just the most amazing experience.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. I can relate to that a lot. I lived on a lot of acreage here in Florida, and kind of the same thing. There was a piece of it that came up for sale. We, said if somebody doesn't buy this, then we worry about development and it not staying a green space for the wildlife. And yeah, turkeys and fox squirrels, which are really neat.
Yeah.
And of course, gray squirrels, deer. And one day I was coming home and there was just an alligator walking across the road. And I was like, "Hey, buddy, the lake's that way." And he was like, "Yep, I'm good." And it's just amazing. Snakes, certainly venomous snakes. We try to stay away from those, but plenty of non-venomous snakes too. But it really just makes a huge difference being able to see all of that around you all the time.
Absolutely. That's what I get to come home to. So, I definitely, love to take hikes and I like to go and travel, but also just coming home and seeing foxes. I've had coyotes. I don't have alligators. My closest thing that I've had was a snapping turtle. So it was actually outside my road and I was trying to get it onto the property, and I eventually got a shovel and kind of shoveled it off the road and onto my property. So, I was worried about it. I just didn't want to get run over or anything like that. So
yeah, we had that experience the other day with a turtle that was going across the road, and we have a lot of them around here, so people are kind of used to looking out for them, and you make sure and swerve around, everybody slows down. And a couple people ahead of me had swerved around and gone around this turtle, but then it was our turn and the road was otherwise empty, so we pulled over and we moved him off the road in the direction that he was going to keep him safe. But my daughter was in the car and she made me laugh because as soon as I moved the turtle, she's like, "Mom, you better wash your hands. You got to worry about the bacteria and things." I was like, "Oh, you're such a veterinarian's child."
Absolutely. Salmonella. You got to be careful.
Yes.
She's absolutely right. I can see a veterinarian in the training right there. And that's great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah, just, I'm with you in that, protecting the animals that we see, and even if they're wanting to snapping turtle us, and making sure they get where they need to go. Well, Dr. Rosenfeld, this has been a great talk. I feel like we covered so many important topics from, career opportunities to conservation and wildlife to almost like symbiosis with us as humans and the world around us. So I want to say a huge thank you to you for joining me. Any final thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
Well, I was just going to say, I think to me, certainly there's ways for people to learn more through online programs and then participating, ones that go abroad. All of those, I think, are ways that, things people can connect to it. So, I mean, it could be in your backyard. It could be, maybe your state or going abroad. In any way, we need to keep our connection to nature. I think that's really important. It contributes to our mental, our physical health. And I think to remove ourselves from that green space is really a crime, because I think that's where we start getting into health issues. And, for me, I know I could start getting depressed if I don't do my hikes and do my walks and stuff. So it really keeps me balanced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Rosenfeld, I've really just had such a great time getting to talk to you and learn about your career and this passion when it comes to wildlife and conservation and all of the work that you do. So thank you first and foremost for reaching out and for contacting me and sharing all of this. Thank you for listening to the podcast. And thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I look forward to future podcasts.
Well, I hope all of you out there listening enjoyed that talk as much as I did. Dr. Rosenfeld, I can't thank you enough for joining me. It was really a great time. Thank you so much for sending me your article and all of these resources on wildlife identification. I am enjoying those so much. And again, thank you for your time and agreeing to come and talk to me on the podcast and share your story and your research and some of your experiences. Of course, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone out there listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast to help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. For more episodes, you can click on the education tab on the VetFolio website or find us wherever you get your podcasts. As always, we'd love to hear your input on this talk as well as ideas for topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. If you have a great article that you've written or something you want to share, absolutely feel free to reach out. You can email me at dvm@vetfolio.com. We can connect on Facebook at Dr. Cassie DVM, or you can find me on Instagram at dr.cassie.dvm. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.